Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. Folks, a historic day in Washington, D.C. as President Biden officially nominates federal judge Ketanji Brown Jackson for the Supreme Court seat. We'll have the breakdown with our culture crew to get their insight on the big nomination. Also, we'll give you an update on the latest in the reparations movement with Dr. Ron Daniels. And then, can you believe it's been 10 years since the killing of Trayvon Martin? We'll be joined later by Professor Melina Abdullah of the Black Lives Matter Los Angeles chapter to talk to us about what has happened over the past 10 years and what can we expect next. We got that and a whole lot more on today's edition of The Culture, so stay riding with us as we're coming right back to you right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Today, this is a historic day in Washington, D.C., as President Joe Biden has officially announced and nominated his choice for the Supreme Court. He has tapped federal Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to serve the seat that is being vacated by current Justice Stephen Breyer. Now, Jackson is currently on the U.S. Courts of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and the president said that she is a proven consensus builder. Now, with this nomination, this would make Judge Jackson the first Black woman to sit on the powerful court of the Supreme Court. Now, also, she will be only the sixth woman if she is confirmed to serve on the court, but she would be joined by three other already there, including the first Latina, Judge Sonia Sotomayor. I want to give you an opportunity to hear directly from President Biden's choice and hear what she has to say as she accepts today's nomination at the White House. Check this out.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am truly humbled by the extraordinary honor of this nomination, and I am especially grateful for the care that you have taken in discharging your constitutional duty in service of our democracy with all that is going on in the world today. I also offer my sincerest thanks to you as well, Madam Vice President, for your invaluable role in this nomination process. I must begin these very brief remarks by thanking God for delivering me to this point in my professional journey. My life has been blessed beyond measure, and I do know that one can only come this far by faith. Among my many blessings, and indeed the very first, is the fact that I was born in this great country. The United States of America is the greatest beacon of hope and democracy the world has ever known. I was also blessed from my early days to have had a supportive and loving family. My mother and father, who have been married for 54 years, are at their home in Florida right now, and I know that they could not be more proud. It was my father who started me on this path when I was a child, as the president mentioned. My father made the fateful decision to transition from his job as a public high school history teacher and go to law school. Some of my earliest memories are of him sitting at the kitchen table, reading his law books. I watched him study, and he became my first professional role model. My mother, who was also a public high school teacher, provided invaluable support in those early days, working full-time to enable my father's career transition while also guiding and inspiring 4-year-old me. My only sibling, my brother Ketaj, came along half a decade later, and I'm so proud of all that he's accomplished. After graduating from Howard University, he became a police officer and a detective on some of the toughest streets in the inner city of Baltimore. After that, he enlisted in the Army, serving 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. I believe that he was following the example set by my uncles who are in law enforcement. You may have read that I have one uncle who got caught up in the drug trade and received a life sentence. That is true. But law enforcement also runs in my family. In addition to my brother, I had 2 uncles who served decades as police officers, one of whom became the police chief in my hometown of Miami, Florida. I am standing here today by the grace of God as testament to the love and support that I've received from my family. I have also been blessed with many dear friends, colleagues, mentors, law clerks. I could not possibly name all of the people to whom I owe great thanks. But I must mention specifically the 3 brilliant jurists for whom I had the privilege of serving as a law clerk at the outset of my legal career. U.S. District Judge Patty Saris in Massachusetts, U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Bruce Selya in Rhode Island, and last but certainly not least, Associate Justice Stephen Breyer of the Supreme Court of the United States. Justice Breyer, in particular, not only gave me the greatest job that any young lawyer could ever hope to have, but he also exemplified every day in every way that a Supreme Court justice can perform at the highest level of skill and integrity while also being guided by civility, grace, pragmatism, and generosity of spirit. Justice Breyer, the members of the Senate will decide if I fill your seat, but please know that I could never fill your shoes. To my dear family, those who are here with me now and those who are watching from home, I am forever indebted to you for your love and support. To my beloved husband, Patrick, thank you for being my rock today and every day for these past 26 years. I love you. To my daughters, Talia and Layla, you are the light of my life. Please know that whatever title I may hold or whatever job I may have, I will still be your mom. That will never change. There are so many other people I would love to be able to address and to thank, but time is short, so let me end by sharing an interesting coincidence that has actually meant a great deal to me over the years. As it happens, I share a birthday with the first Black woman ever to be appointed as a federal judge, the Honorable Constance Baker Motley. We were born exactly 49 years to the day apart. Today, I proudly stand on Judge Motley's shoulders, sharing not only her birthday, but also her steadfast and courageous commitment to equal justice under law. Judge Motley's life and career has been a true inspiration to me as I have pursued this professional path. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed as the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, I can only hope that my life and career, my love of this country and the Constitution, and my commitment to upholding the rule of law and the sacred principles upon which this great nation was founded will inspire future generations of Americans. Thank you again, Mr. President, for this extraordinary honor.
I forgot to introduce the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and the second gentleman. That seems strange to say that, but the second, Douglas Emhoff. They're both here as well, so thank you. Thank you all.
Folks, you just heard the remarks from the nominee for the Supreme Court, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, President Joe Biden's choice for the highest court in the country. Also, this is President Biden's fulfillment of his major campaign promise that he would have a Black woman sit on the Supreme Court. Speaking of Black women, let me bring the two dynamic women from our culture crew to join us in this conversation. And for this historic day, we're joined by Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an advocate and educator, and Bakari Jones. Bakari is an activist, and she works within the LGBTQIA community. And we're so happy to have them joining us again. Bakari, Shaquaya, thank you so much for joining us, ladies.
Peace, Farajii. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. All right. Big moment in Washington today. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Very, very, this is a huge moment for President Biden. This is a huge moment, I think, for, just for the community and for the country. And the likelihood, I think, of her being confirmed is pretty high. But ladies, what are your thoughts about this nomination and this announcement?
Shaquaya, please take it away for us.
Okay. As I'm sitting here, I'm trying to, because I watched her nomination speech earlier, and then I had butterflies, and in the sense of the relief of being able to see a Black woman so rightly positioned to sit in the highest court of this country. I would say excitement, but I think it's relief more than anything, because it is representation that is not only well-deserved and needed, but her story, her background, her experience is tremendous. And again, I agree with her, a testament to faith, a testament to hard work and diligence. Yeah. And as someone who is personally aspiring in the legal field and constantly looking at the instrumental change makers that have laid the path in our legal and judiciary system, this feels so good. And I'm extremely happy. I'm extremely motivated to ascend in my personal career based on not just this move, but other historical placements, or should I say appointments on a federal level in the past 8 to 10 years. And I think that I agree with you. Her appointment should be, or the judiciary process that takes place in the Congress should happen quickly. Hopefully, Amy Coney Barrett's process serves as an example, and things are not dredged. But I'm extremely excited for what's to come in terms of people, since the announcement was made today. I really do hope that people go and learn more about her background and learn more about, if you care to get that deep, read some of her opinions and her rulings from the past. I know you're going to speak to her experience, but the fact that she was a public defender,
huge.
Huge. The opportunity to have that, have her insight in the highest court is a privilege. And I think everyone should be celebrating, regardless of your political position or demographic background. This is an amazing moment for America in light of a lot that's not so amazing.
Absolutely. I would have to, Shaquaya, I would totally agree. And I think just that point that you just made, I mean, just by her being in the serving as a public defender, that is a unique experience that we often don't see for Supreme Court justices. And I think Bakari, when you look at that experience, she's also has worked with numerous cases, and she has issued several high-profile rulings. In 2019, for example, she ruled against the Trump administration attempt to shield the former White House counsel Don McGahn from testifying before Congress, writing that the presidents are not kings. So she comes to this comes to this nomination bringing a certain level of insight, not just about the Constitution, but something that I think that we often kind of overlook is providing understanding and context so that the American people can understand the laws of the land in which they are a part of. Talk to me about that.
Absolutely. I think you and Shaquille both just, summarized so much of why this is a historic moment. And I think, Farajii, to your last point, I think, I guess it boils down to her ideology, which I understand is considered pragmatic, right? But she brings this very holistic and intersectional approach to her work. And so I think for folks that look like us, that are on this channel today, I think, for us, it represents, to Shaquille's point, a level of relief that we know that we have someone that is thinking about all of the different nuances in the cases that she'll be deciding. So historic, and exciting. And again, to Shaquille's point, like just a relief after all of the violence and stressors, just injustices that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, this is a moment to celebrate.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is, when you look at a nomination like this, nominations, of course, we all know, sisters, that nominations can be very political. So some of the nominations may happen very quickly, while other nominations seems to drag on. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who's a Democrat out of New York, said in this recent statement that Judge Jackson will receive a prompt hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee in the coming weeks. Then after the Judiciary Committee finishes their work, I will ask the Senate to move immediately to confirm her to the Supreme Court. So the Democrats have kind of, surrounded her, given her the support, given her their nod, and said, we're going to make this happen very quickly. But Shaquille, do you think that, I mean, we are in a very deeply partisan time right now in this country? Do you foresee the Republicans putting up some roadblocks to this nomination?
Well, they will try, in the sense of just asking extensive questions. Yeah. I don't think beyond extensive questioning, there is not much that they can do because of the votes that they have. Democrats have the 50 vote threshold. I'm assuming, I presume there aren't any, stalls or anyone outstanding to support her. I do believe because of the very obvious connection she has in terms of making progressive opinions and rulings against the Trump administration, that some of his most staunch supporters and advocates will advance notions of questioning her ability to rule fairly. But I don't believe that there will be much barrier that they can actually create because of the judicial process that happens in the space that the Democrats have to move this along quickly. So besides extensive questioning and attempts to probably smudge her character through media, there's not much that will be done. Yeah.
And she's a young woman. I mean, she's 51 years old. When you get on the Supreme Court, that's a service for life. You know what I mean? So she has, God willing, will be blessed with many, many years to be in that seat. And, I think that speaks to, that longevity. I mean, Bakari, we know that Supreme Court nominations, they don't happen all the time. A new president gets into the White House. But when they do happen, it's a very big deal. These are the folks that will uphold, particularly your view on a lot of those big issues, whether it's coming from reproductive rights to political issues. I mean, they are your advocates, so to speak, in the court, in the judicial system. And so, this is a big nomination. And I think it's also, we should need to speak to the fact that Justice Stephen Breyer, who is a law professor, constitutional law professor, for him to kind of cultivate and to build, kind of help her along the way, That's a big thing. That, and Shaquay, you said it before the show started. You know, her history is interesting, and this is a big, big deal to see her be in this place at this time, at this moment that this country is in. Bakari, what's your take?
Everything you just said, Farajii. You know, my understanding is that she was Justice Breyer's clerk. You know, so she had the opportunity to be directly under his tutelage. I've not studied law, but I have, you know, what I know about law is just the level, the deep extent to which the justices go to fully understand and comprehend these cases from so many different perspectives. So I think it's incredible. I mean, we've already, I think, acknowledged that. I think when it comes to the senators, I think to Shaquaya's point, it sounds like there's, you know, only going to be the opportunity for them to belabor this. But my understanding is that you know, that the Democrats already have the threshold, the minimum threshold needed to go ahead and get her in.
Yeah, I want to say to your point.
Yeah, go ahead, Shaquaya.
Oh, I'm sorry, Farajii. I just want to say that we should recognize that the serendipity of this of her appointment really rests on her background and not on Joe Biden. I think this is a gift for Joe Biden, so that in the case that her background is unimpeachable, I think, as has been said or shared across the media. But to be quite frank, that she has such a solid and aggregated position with the retiring judge who's making this appointment possible, with her background varying from service in a public defender all the way up through the second highest court in the land, and having extensive experience and relationships with people across the aisle. If you identify her political background as being a Democrat, she is someone who is clearly not just indicative of her relationship in terms of having a relative relationship with the former House Speaker Paul Ryan, or GOP House Speaker Paul Ryan, but there's so much about her background that she was made for this, if you will. And this is a gift to Joe Biden to be able to fulfill his campaign promise, which honestly, without this appointment, his relationship with the Black community is so bleak right now because of unfulfilled promises. This is a gift. And I just acknowledge that.
No, I think we do need to acknowledge that. And I, you know what? I like how you put it, because this is a gift that can keep on giving, right? For the Democrats, especially for the Biden-Harris administration. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a big campaign promise that he said at the very beginning when he was campaigning, and then he was able to deliver on it. This is a gift. My hope is that people understand the ramifications of this. You know, a lot of times, and you know, I just got to say it, we don't pay attention to these types of these moments. We don't pay attention to the nomination to the Supreme Court. We know that the Supreme Court handles big, high-profile cases. We know that they handle cases that's related to constitutional issues. But I feel like, Bakari, that people are still kind of out of touch with the importance and significance and the level of power that a judge has when they are in that seat.
Absolutely. And I think part of what makes that abstract is, you know, to Shaquaya's point, is something that happens serendipitously, So it's not something that can be predicted. You know, Justice Thomas, I think, is 10 years younger than Justice Breyer. So, you know, even to your earlier point, Farajii, the odds of President Biden being able to have another opportunity within his administration is not likely, again, you know, assuming that everyone stays healthy and continues to live on and thrive and flourish. But I think that's, you know, that's part of what makes it monumental, but it's also something that makes it harder to, I think, retain a lot of times in our historical memory.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, Shaquaya, by you working within the school system and you being an educator, you know, how would you teach about this moment? How would you encourage other people to see this moment as being significant and just not another government position being appointed?
Well, I think what's required is really having an overview provided and talking about the role of the court system. I think oftentimes our community, the Black community specifically, in terms of our interaction with the court system, there is this, there are two things. There's fear and there's ignorance in terms of how it's interfaced and the presupposed consequences of how you interface the court system. And I know that, and I've worked with amazing history educators who've provided overview of the equal branches of the government and what the court, how the court plays a significant role in upholding and or shaping how the Constitution is actually implemented in terms of our daily life, but also, of course, in legal affairs. And I would provide an overview of the court system in terms of identifying what the Supreme Court role is, all the way down through local courts. I would paint a picture, literally. I would, if this was a lesson, I would print out pictures of every Supreme Court justice, right? And I would actually span them and probably do an activity to prompt questions about, or prompt my students to question perhaps why the Supreme Court makeup has been white and male for the primary for the extensive duration of this country's history. And I would ask them about the significant political activities and events that have happened in the naming and appointment of female judges, and most specifically looking at race, at Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and now this one, and who has been elected based on what issues, and drawing correlations to the time in history of where we are as a country and the direction that we're seeking to go, so that we can see the broader picture of why this is so important, what will be affected by this decision, and what that means to them on a personal level in terms of the issues that they interface with on a daily basis and what they hope to see change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, sisters, we're going to see over these next couple of weeks this confirmation process take moving forward. But like I said at the very beginning of this conversation, I foresee that this is going to happen. I don't see any major roadblocks either coming from the Republicans or any other place. So I think we're going to see history in the making in 2022 with having the first Black woman sitting on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Very, very historic moment. And I think that this is going to possibly help the Democrats for this year's election in some way, give them a little boost that they need. But we will have to see. But I'm pretty certain that this is going to happen. So, all right, folks, look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come right back, let's talk about the Reparations Now movement, give you the latest developments on this whole conversation about reparations and how will it affect us, what it would look like. And we're going to be checking in with Dr. Ron Daniels, who serves as the convener of the National African American Reparations Commission. We'll have that conversation up next. So stay with us. Just getting started here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Hey, Black, I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the show. More than 3 decades later, after it was first introduced, the great historic bill HR 40 now would create a House bill that would create a commission to study reparations for Black Americans has the vote to pass, as its key champions are saying. Now, we've been talking about this issue of reparations before, but now that we're seeing some more momentum around this conversation, around this idea of repairing the damage that was done to Black people in this country. And so we wanted to bring another voice into this conversation, a voice that has been doing the work of pushing and advocating for reparations. He has served as the convener for the National African American Reparations Commission. And we are so happy to have him join us on the line today, Dr. Ron Daniels. Good evening, Doc. How are you, sir? Thank you. Dr. Daniels, I think you're on mute, dear brother. That's all right. We're going to set you up. We're going to get Dr. Daniels all set up here, folks. And of course, as we have this conversation, we want you to post your comments by posting to our YouTube page and also on our Facebook page. And of course, in a few moments, we'll be bringing in our culture crew members, Shaquaya McKenzie, Bakari Jones. Folks, I want to let you know that this has been a long time coming with HR 40. This is a bill that was initiated by the late, great Senator, House Representative John Conyers. And this bill actually came out after President Reagan had made the strides to provide reparations for Japanese Americans. And so Representative John Conyers said, well, if you're going to make an effort to repair the damage with that community, you most certainly need to make an effort to repair the damage to the Black community. 30 years. Bakari, I mean, we're kind of moving forward here. The push is still happening. But what's your take of this? After 30 years, we're starting to see some momentum with this bill still up for discussion.
I think it just goes to show, that a lot of the change that we want to see is really about having long-term strategy. In this instance, I think that it seems that, it's been 30 years. And I think that one of the things Senator Jackson said is essentially that, she needed to go one by one. The folks that were organizing around this issue had to go one by one to really start to change the minds and perspectives of folks on this topic. So to me, it seems that I think the tides are turning. I think that we have too much data now, too many instances where other groups have received reparations for us to not, be a part of that conversation in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, Shaquaya, when we look at this, I'm committed to using this platform to continue to push the conversation further along about reparations, because I feel like we're still in this space of thinking of reparations as just a free check, when there is so much more that this, not just this bill, but this idea of repairing the damage to Black people, there's so much more that entails besides just getting some money from the government.
Absolutely. I think it's long been refused an opportunity to prevail in a conversation meaningful to the point of the development of a commission, because according to survey, I'm not going to say this in a generalized manner. I'll try to use research to back what I'm saying, but according to surveys that have been conducted over the years, over two-thirds of African Americans or individuals of African descent believe that Black people deserve reparations. Maybe almost 18% of white people believe this. I think that the undertaking, as you just mentioned, is not the idea of a financial payback, if you will, but it's the idea of altering, changing, resetting the structures of our economic, social, political, public, housing, everything that is our society and the systems that support how individuals are able to, gain upward mobility. We've been crippled every step of the way, and therefore every part of the system needs reform. And I want, and hoping that there is movement, and I just want to say ashe to our ancestor John Conyers and thanking him for taking this charge in light of Ronald Reagan approving reparations for Japanese Americans who endured internment camps. I think that, if we look at that, if we look at the reparations passed to 9/11 families, if we look at reparations passed even to victims of the Holocaust, right? Mm-hmm. Reparations of our country where it did not take place. The undertaking has to happen on an educational lens. And so there's going to be a dual, I'm saying both dual, D-U-A-L, and a dual, D-U-E-L, in a sense that there is an affront on the educational system right now in different local and state policies to eradicate the truth, this fight against critical race theory, right? But the history of what has happened, the ignorance to the history, I think, is the impetus of why only 18% of white Americans believe that reparations are deserved. They don't understand what has happened through the centuries process of slavery, Jim Crow, and past Jim Crow, post Jim Crow era, how every aspect of American society has been structured and set to work inadvertently for African Americans. And so I think that, to your original question, what needs to happen is a huge education campaign. But I'm grateful that there are and have been advocates such as William Darity, such as if you don't know who Professor William Darity is at Duke University, look him up, such as author and prolific writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? There have been champions who have been really leading the call in the past decade, more specifically, in just looking at the last 30 years, but in the past decade, to keep this fresh on the minds of Americans in that it is necessary, and that is rightfully deserved.
Absolutely. I want to bring Dr. Ron Daniels in. Dr. Daniels, thank you so much for your time, brother. I know we had a little technical difficulties there, brother.
Yeah, y'all straight. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can. Thank you.
Y'all string a Neanderthal out. I had to search back through and connect the right camera. I finally figured it out because I've been doing this a while. But y'all young brothers and sisters, y'all have to take it easy on the brother up in here. But anyway, we're in, and let me just say it's an honor to be with you, and you just do such wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work on the Black Star Network. I see the advertisements all the time. I'm just so impressed with the brilliance and the commitment. And yes, HR 40 is on the move. One of the things that I wanted to quickly say is that HR 40 is no longer a study bill. It is more than a study bill. You're right. Congressman John Conyers is the legislative champion of same. But the initial HR 40 was a study bill. It was a study bill. And it was a study bill because we used it as an organizing tool. And of course, that was a result of some serious work by Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists, people like Mario Bedelli, Chokwe Lumumba, and many, many others. But they made a tactical decision after the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 passed and the Japanese were able to get their reparations to say, even though we know we already have the evidence, we can study it ourselves. If people have questions about it, even in the African-American community, and certainly in the broader society, we will acquiesce to the idea of having a study bill as sort of the lowest common denominator. Can't we just study this? And of course, that was what it was used for, as an organizing tool. Congressman Conyers, of course, very adroitly and brilliantly used HR 40 to signify the 40 acres and a mule as a way of putting it out. He introduced it every year religiously. And what we were able to do is to go out to some of the legacy organizations, NAACP, Urban League, faith leaders, and say, can't we as Black people just study this? Because quite frankly, one of the great efforts has been to persuade ourselves. Because number one of the injuries and damages is to our own psyche, to our own sense of self, that we would not maybe believe it's possible. But on the other hand, people were saying, I believe in reparations, but are we going to get this in America? They ain't never going to do that. Plus, I got issues to deal with right now. Why are we dealing with this? So we had to get over that hump. And we did through organizing. But by the time we got to about 2015, particularly with the leadership of NCOBRA, our legacy organization, acting within the context of the National African American Reparations Commission, we went to Congressman John Conyers and said, studying, there's enough studies. We want to change this from a study bill to a remedy bill. So if you read the bill now, it says, yes, study. It is a bill that will establish a commission to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans. So now it ain't about if. We're going to be talking about what does it really look like. And let me just say this. This is the important piece of it all. And you cited some of the people who've been involved in it, some more than others. But certainly this is a cross-generational struggle that has produced this point in history. But the Conyers bill in its original version, not because we could not get more sponsors, but because that was not a priority, never got more than 50 votes. Today, we stand on the brink. We have now, with those who are willing to be co-sponsors, 196, and 20 people, congressional people, who say, well, I'm not going to be a co-sponsor for various other reasons, but when it comes to the floor for a vote, I will vote for it. That is 216 votes out of the 218 required. I'm a devotee of Queen Mother Moore. Many people in this audience will be familiar with who Queen Mother Moore was. She was my mentor. She's the one who took my brain. She said she was a brain surgeon. She wanted to operate on constipated minds. Mine was one of them. And thank God she did, because she liberated. I didn't even know what reparations were. But she is smiling, along with many others across generations, all the way back to Cali House and beyond, because we are on the brink of getting this done. Now, the challenge is floor vote. Even if we get the floor vote, we know that it's not going to make it through the Senate. So in reality, what we're looking at is a massive effort, which we believe will be successful, to have this enacted by executive order, which means that the commission will be functioning. But that does not mean it's over. That will be a huge victory. It means the organizing must then continue in order to make sure that that commission is true to developing the kinds of proposals that will really genuinely affect repair. But it's not just there. This reparations movement is exploding all over the country, indeed exploding all over the world. Evanston, Illinois, Robin Ruth Simmons, courageous African-American sister, visionary, courageous, building on the legacy of the work of Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, who had been at the Durban conference. You know, she said, look, there's only one way to deal with the wealth gap, but the housing crisis we got in Evanston, we have to have reparations. And so she was able to push forward to get $10 million over 10 years. But she also wanted to say, well, let me get some help on how to do this. And so she approached the National African American Reparations Commission, and we worked with her to help make Evanston a model that can be replicated all across this country. We certified it as a model for reparations initiatives all over the country. And you will see it's exploding. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, Detroit, Asheville, Providence, all across the country, municipalities are springing up, pushing for reparations in a way that we had never believed. In California, they already have a reparations commission modeled after HR 40, which is actually up and running and deliberating and debating and discussing. New York is likely to be next. New Jersey is coming after that. So my brothers and sisters and friends and your listening audience, this is an incredible moment in the history of these United States of America. It is not over. It is a point towards really a racial reckoning to finally deal with the repair, not only for enslavement, but for all of the racially exclusionary policies that are the legacy of enslavement, as documented by Dr. Claude Anderson, Black Labor, White Wealth. He lays it out right up to the current period.
Dr. Daniels, I'm wondering, I got two questions. The first question is that this is an election year. Now, during the 2020 Democratic primary election, the Washington Post asked candidates if they thought the federal government should pay reparations to the descendants of enslaved people. Nearly all of the leading contenders at that time, including President Biden, said that they supported an in-depth study of the issue. And this is a big change from what we saw from President Barack Obama when he said that he did not when he rejected the idea back in 2008. And the reason he did, he said that he understands that it's justified, but the politics of white resistance and resentment made the issue a non-starter during his presidency. What's the likelihood that this can be a part of the electoral conversation for this year, especially when we're bringing in new senators and new congresspeople?
Well, it will be a part of the electoral equation because it will be done. So what's going to happen is, as Dr. John Henry Clark said, white nationalism is the enemy of black nationalism. So white nationalism, we're in one of the most dangerous periods in the history of these United States of America, when you can have a white nationalist be a policy advisor in the White House, which is what and still one more still there, Stephen Miller. Of course, Bannon was right up in the White House, and you saw what happened on January 6th, and this whole MAGA mad crowd. I mean, we're in the dying throes of this version of a racialized capitalist system, and they are so it is dangerous. So there are going to be attacks, but this will not stop it from happening. It will be enacted, and it will be enacted precisely because Black people in this country are the most reliable voters within the Democratic Party. The reason why it exploded upon the stage in the 2016 election is because candidates finally came to a reckoning and an understanding that we need to talk about reparations. And we had to tell them, stop, don't tell us what forms it should be, because then they're going to trip over themselves. You know how that happens. We said, no, just support HR 40. And almost all of them agreed to support HR 40. So I'm not worried about it being an electoral issue. It will be an electoral issue in the sense that, in fact, it's going to be an electoral issue if it doesn't happen. The fact that it does happen will strengthen the hands of the Democratic Party moving forward as they face these vicious white nationalists, who are coming, if they coming from critical race theory, they coming for everything that we stand for in terms of obliterating Black people in this country.
Absolutely. Bakari, what's your question for Dr. Ron Daniels? Bakari, can you hear us?
Sorry about that. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Dr. Daniels, first, I just want to say thank you for the way that you just laid that out for us brilliantly. Yeah, I think I am just curious in general about more of the work that was done in terms of changing the minds of our folks as it relates to attitudes around reparations.
Well, I think there are several things. First of all, you have to stay at it. You have to be relentless in it, and you have to be smart. That's why HR 40 was a wise organizing tool. But there were various things that just began to have people believe. As Reverend Jesse Jackson, one of the great leaders of that era, he talks about keep hope alive. People believe that. What does that keep hope alive? Well, a hopeless people do not fight for reform or revolution. It's always on the basis of hope. So that little trite phrase that sounds trite is based on scientific evidence that when you keep hope alive, people will do almost anything. And so we had to persuade our people. That's why HR 40 was a good organizing tool. But then there were other things that happened. We had a ancestor who just, has just joined the realm, State Senator Bill Owens. Many people don't know about him. He was a state senator in Massachusetts. He was the first state senator to come forth and say, Massachusetts, you owe us. Well, when that happened, boom, the news came out. Massachusetts didn't win it necessarily, but it put it in the air. You had Deidre Pellman Farmer, who came out and working with a number of lawyers and so forth, who challenged corporations. You owe us. Well, eventually he was ruled that, well, you don't have standing given the nature of your American jurisprudence, but that was a big push forward in that regard. And then, of course, you had people like, and this was already referenced in this generation, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates was, I didn't know who Ta-Nehisi Coates was. I know who he is now. And you know that the fruit don't fall too far from the tree because I know his father.
Right.
His father is Paul Coates, Black classic.
Yes,
but I didn't know that. But this brother did not even believe in reparations. But he did the study, and he did the study in Chicago. And by the way, his other contribution he made was to have people to understand that it's not just about enslavement, even though we're talking about the greatest Holocaust in human history in terms of the number of people who lost their lives. It is about all of those other racially exclusionary policies. He studied redlining in the city of Chicago, and he said, wow, look at what, with the complicity and overt actions of the city, happened to Black people. And so when he did that, he became a convert. And all of a sudden, I'm walking around and everybody was talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates and what he was saying. Then you have tomorrow is going to be the anniversary, unfortunately, of the martyrdom of Trayvon Martin. He did not die in vain. Why? Because born out of his death came Black Lives Matter, right?
Yep.
And Black Lives Matter, which then the broader umbrella Movement for Black Lives, they became engaged. A new generation saying, we know y'all been involved, but we got some we with you, but we got some even deeper ideas about invest, divest. And so that was a major contribution. And then, of course, it seems to me that one of the things we have to look at is that a lot of people are not aware of is on the international front, CARICOM, the Caribbean nations, because this is a global Pan-Africanist struggle. And so the nations of CARICOM in 2014 came together, all of them. Some of them are moderate, some of them are more conservative, some of them are radical. They said, look, we are demanding of the former colonial powers, even though they are still dependent. They said, y'all created this mess. We got people who are sick from diabetes. We got people who are homeless. We have people in poverty. We are demanding reparations for Native genocide and African enslavement. Boom. Well, what did that do? All of a sudden, we said, wow, if they can do it and heads of state are demanding it, we seized upon that as an organizing tool, and we brought that right up inside the United States of America and created the National African American Reparations Commission and included in COBRA and a number of other leading activists to put forth a 10-point program as a framework for reparations to begin to push forward in that regard. And then I have to say, the public lynching. And again, I keep listening to his daughter. Daddy, you changed the whole world. That his daughter said, Daddy, you changed the whole world. The public lynching of George Floyd. You know, he did not die in vain. You know, we wish he had not died. We wish he had not. But it changed the world because it was like in a way next week is going to be Bloody Sunday.
Right.
It's like Bloody Sunday in this era. I mean, people saw that live on television, and it just shook the entirety of not only this country and the world. So all of a sudden, you had white folks coming on board who, in Idaho, Wisconsin, in Idaho and Montana and all, Wyoming and rural areas, and Black Lives Matter signs all over the suburbs. So that was a moment of national inflection that began to also have people examine the nature of white supremacy in this society, and to have a president who publicly says the words out of his mouth, systemic racism, and of course he's getting attacked for it, but he's saying it, right? And he's responding in that regard. And this first executive order was on equity, saying we got to stop this now himself for equity policy. So all of these things, it seems to me, have contributed in a major, major, major way to the moment that we're in at this point in history. And finally, to have a concrete example like Evanston, do not underestimate that. When Evanston actually voted and then actually moved through a process of awarding it, then some people said, oh, it's too small. Well, yeah, it's too small. Nobody's saying the fact that it's small does not mean it's not reparations. It is reparations. That's why the federal legislation is so important, because that's where the trillions of dollars that will be there that are needed to go through places like Evanston to build out those programs. But people all over the world responded. Why? Because it said, keep hope alive, because it is alive. It is concrete. It can be done, and it is being done. So we are in one of the greatest moments in the history of African people on these hostile shores. And in our hands, it's ironic that it's in our hands, this democracy that was flawed from the very beginning, that was always intended to be a white man's, and I emphasize man's land, because it was not intended for women or at all. It is in our hands, ironically, to be those who are really going to radically change the nature of what these United States of America are.
Absolutely. Dr. Ron Daniels, who serves as the convener for the National African American Reparations Commission. Folks, if you want to get more information, and again, I'm going to continue to use my platform, this platform, to continue to bring you up to date on everything that's happening in this movement this year. But if you want to get more information, check out reparations.com.org. And that is the official website for the National African American Reparations Commission. Dr. Daniels, we really appreciate you and all of those who are working with you on this very, very important issue. And again, we're going to bring you back and others folks back, because I know without a shadow of doubt, we need to keep the conversation going. So Dr. Daniels, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks for inviting.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about what the Interior Department is doing to change the culture of names for federal lands. We'll get into that conversation. And also in the next hour, we're going to talk about 10 years after Trayvon Martin. Can you believe it? It was in 2012 when that young brother was shot and killed right in his own neighborhood, and how his murder started a movement. We'll be checking in with Professor Melina Abdullah to give us some insight about the past 10 years and what to expect next. So stay with us. A lot to get to in the next hour right here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome to the second half of today's show. Just had some fantastic conversation with Dr. Ron Daniels of the National African American Reparations Committee and talking about some of the latest developments as the bill HR 40 is moving forward in the House and has enough votes to move forward to the next step. So we're going to continue to keep you posted on all that is happening with the reparations movement in Congress, as well as what's going on, of course, on the grassroots level. But speaking of reparations, we also have to acknowledge that there is so much diversity in this country that there are many nations and many communities that are still struggling to get their identity and, most importantly, their respect that they deserve. And one nation of people is the Native American community. The Native American community, of course, it has become a small community, but they have become a very influential community, not just from a historic perspective, but most importantly, dealing with some of the big issues, everything from COVID-19 to housing discrimination and many other social issues. Well, history was made when Deb Haaland, who serves as the Interior Secretary for the Department of the Interior, when she was brought into this federal cabinet position. She is the first Native American woman to be brought into this cabinet position. And as part of her role and responsibility, she is moving forward using the Interior Department to move forward with plans to remove a very derogatory and offensive name called squaw, a term called squaw, which is a derogatory and offensive name to Native American women. She formed a task force and declared the word squaw derogatory back in November of 2021. And now the department is seeking public comments on name replacements for more than 660 geographic features that contain the word. Now, historically, the term, let me just break this down for you. This term has been used as an offensive, ethnic, racial, and sexist slur, particularly for indigenous women, according to the Interior Department. So the term originated from the Algonquian word for woman, but its meaning has been skewed for centuries by white people. So the task force, dubbed the Derogatory Geographic Names Task Force, has also moved to replace the word with SQ dash or space. Instead of giving that name even more power, they're just removing the last three letters of the word and saying that this name is no longer will be used in official communication. I want to bring in my culture crew, Shaquaya McKenzie, Bakari Jones, to get their take on this story, because I think it's very important with sisters that as much as we talk about what's going on with Black people, we have some conversations about the Latino community, but we don't have enough conversations, I don't think, Shaquaya, about what is going on with our Native American brothers and sisters. And people might say, well, why should we even talk about this? Because for a lot of us, me, we're part Native American.
Our indigenous brothers and sisters are, in fact, our brothers and sisters. They were refuge when we were enslaved. They were also victims of enslavement. We often, as you do, Farajii, acknowledge that we are married by blood. And therefore, their struggle is our struggle, has always been our struggle. Indigenous peoples of the world, that is what we recognize in terms of those who identify as Pan-African. We recognize their struggles as our struggles. And I think that the appointment of the Interior Department Secretary, and being that she was the first Native appointment in the history of this country, was skillfully and carefully made. Yep. The decision, as Joe Biden is with the Ketanji Brown, is very mindful in knowing that the reform and address of wrongs that have been done can really, truly, and should be led by those upon it was done to. The reform needs to come from a place of experience. And I just appreciate the mindfulness in terms of us being able to span what is happening in America on all different levels in terms of acknowledging language and its importance. Yeah. I just really appreciate that she was able to get this done. I think, the momentum of sports groups acknowledging the wrongful use of slurs definitely created momentum, I'm sure, and padded an opportunity to do this and it not be met with any whatever ridiculous refute or rebuke could be made about it. But I just really appreciate the acknowledgement of the importance of language and how reconciling the wrongful use of derogatory language is being met at a federal level.
Oh, I would wholeheartedly agree with you, Shaquaya. And I think that we do need to check. I want to pull up the picture of Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, because I think it's important that we understand the power of language. This is what she said: "Words matter, particularly in our work to make our nation's public lands and waters accessible and welcoming to people of all backgrounds. Consideration of these replacements is a big step forward in our efforts to remove derogatory terms whose expiration dates are long overdue. Words matter, particularly in our work to make our nation's public lands and waters accessible and welcoming to people of all backgrounds." Powerful statement coming from the Interior Secretary, Bakari, because I truly believe that, some people might make this, a conversation like what we've seen with the pulling down of Confederate statues. It could possibly be in that same category, but what I see happening with this is that you have a Native American woman who is saying enough is enough and using the power of her bully pulpit to make those changes.
Absolutely. I think the points that you and Shaquaya made, I think, are, just completely spot on. It's monumental, the role that she's in. And for me personally, I think we all understand the importance and the potential impact that language has. I think it's also something incredible about the fact that the way that it's being removed from some of these locations and the places where the term is used is that because the three remaining characters in that term are going to be removed, I think it also creates space for more conversations to be had. Well, why did, because of that word just being completely removed, right? Like we lose some of the history behind it if it's just completely removed. But I think the way that it's being essentially corrected and partially, stricken from the record, if you will, just from a letter standpoint, I think is also really powerful. And I hope is also, a space where it just continues more of that conversation. And I think that, her being Native American, I think it just, for us, it kind of is in the same line again with, soon to be Justice Brown, that, we see the beginning of some of the reconciliation that needs to happen in our country. So again, this is, I think we're the positivity for today's episode, I think is high, and is a place where, it feels like, yes, we're making strides in the correct direction. And like Dr. Daniel said, just, actually keeping hope alive.
So to that point, Bakari, I love the fact that when Dr. Daniels mentioned that you really can't have any movement unless you have hope. We're so in need of hope right now in this country, right? And we're so in need for those who have been oppressed and afflicted by white supremacy, by the disregard of history. We need to be the ones to step up. I'm happy that the Interior Secretary is saying, I'm going to make this move. Now, this is not just a symbolic move. I mean, this is a cultural move. And now she has codified this by using this as part of her federal, her duties as the Interior Secretary. And that's the type of, I think that's the type of direction that we need to go into at this point. That if you have the power to make the changes for your people, and it will, bring about a change for all people, why not use that power, Shaquaya? Like, don't sit on that power. Don't be don't be afraid. Be unapologetic about making these changes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Farajii. I think we previously in another episode spoke about the frustration that we bear when we recognize that leaders in position are not doing what we put them there to do, whether we put them there for an explicit cause or campaign, or we just expect that they would be able to identify, acknowledge, and rectify issues that concern their community. I know it was certainly a clamor call in years past about different leaders of color that we've had. And right. I think that we are, to Bakari's point, seeing some progressive movement with people doing the work. I love to acknowledge that, the address and the acknowledgement that this term it was a derivative term from an actual Algonquin word that meant women, but it was, of course, derogatorily used by white people. And we know the same was the case for the word that that derived from negra, the Spanish word for black, for a derogatory term used towards people of color, of African descent. And right. I think that some people may see it on its face as something minute, something small to address, in the sense that, yeah, it's a good thing, but is it really that important? And I would love to just, magnify the importance of language, in that this will change for generations to come. People will acknowledge that this is not a word that can be, we can use to entitle and or address Native peoples. And knowing the assignment and handling it is absolutely something that's going to be a part of Interior Secretary Deb Haaland's record.
And to add to that, sisters, one of the big things is that we're really seeing an all-out attack on culture, any type of culture outside of white culture. We are really in this crazy ass moment right now where people, and let me just say that, some people just can't handle being taught about other people. And I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away that this is 2022. You don't want to not only talk about Black history. There's a story that some Native American lawmakers out of Kansas are calling on the resignation of an educator in Kansas for using offensive comments during a state meeting. There was this video that showed that the comments were made, and this was Representative Christina Haswood, who is a Democrat out of Lawrence, Kansas. And she said that this video of Education Commissioner Randy Watson confirms that these comments were made during a public virtual education conference last week, where the commissioner recalled talks with the family members about Indians raiding towns. And that you know, that derogatory statement offended people. It didn't teach people the full context of the history of the Native American people in the state of Kansas. And then you have this education commissioner who refuses to apologize. And I'm just blown away. Like, wait a minute, hold up. So you mean to tell me all this time you had a problem, but now you feel emboldened and empowered enough to say, oh, I don't want to talk about Black history. I don't want to recognize Native American people as being a nation unto themselves. I don't want to talk about anything outside of me. And I just can't believe it that we're in that time, Bakari, that people are fighting tooth and nail to be offensive.
Going down with a serious fight. You know, I think that, you know, it's also the fact that we're living in a time where, you know, at this point now we have multiple groups of folks who have had to fight for the removal of racial slurs. Yeah. So it's also, you know, it's such a curious fight that we've now seen this same group of people lose repeatedly, right? I think that one of the things that, you know, makes Interior, you know, Hallen the best person for this job is that I'm not sure that, you know, what other demographic would have gone in and said, I want to also, replace the use of this term in the same way that these, again, building off the Japanese internment struggle, right? We want to remove the Japanese terms. We want to remove the Black slurs. So this same group of people has lost this fight. So to me, it's just especially interesting to see this. Like, do you also believe that you're going to win? But again, going down with the fight. And I think that, you know, there's not going to be a whole lot of opposition. So.
And see, there should be opposition. I think, and Shaquaya, I really think that we should get into a space, and I know some Black folks are about to just get mad at me, but I don't care. I think we need to be in a space where, look, if you have been affected by the evils of white supremacy in this country, Black folks need to come together, sit at the table with Native Americans. Those two group of people need to come and sit at the table with Latinos. Those group of people need to sit down with those who are immigrating from all different, you know, other parts of the world. Like there has to be an effort. There has to be an intention there to make sure that we are not just in this fight to keep our culture alive on our own. There has to be an intention there that we are in this fight to make sure that not only are we fighting for ourselves, but we're fighting for other people who have been stained and victimized by the attitude of white supremacy. And people push back on that, like you can't be Black and still think about and care about other people.
Well, yeah, there can be silos created in the argumentation about racial representation and advocacy. We know that there are a number of named and unnamed leaders in the space of coalition and allyship building. Immediate in the forefront of my mind is Fred Hampton, who was so instrumental to coalition building across racial and demographic and economic lines. Yeah. And, you know, clearly it's the impetus of his assassination because he wasn't only able to connect with other communities of color, he was able to paint the picture very clearly to disenfranchise white people about how the very system that upholds white supremacy also disenfranchises them. And so I think I'm going to connect to two of your points, the one you just made in terms of thinking about coalition building. You know, one of the more, I think, underrated and it may not be discussed as often as dissension and division is about this country, but you know, what's so beautiful about the millennial and Gen Z generations is that they truly are multiracially connected in the sense that there's not a sense of color blindness. There's a sense of acceptance. There's this, you know, because of the pervasive nature of Black culture and Hispanic culture on mainstream pop culture, there's no way that, you know, in decades past, when we really lived in silos of communities and our culture and our arts and and everything in terms of the performative aspects of how we engage with society has really been siloed according to racial and demographic lines. We're so mixed in now that the expectation is that we can work together. As Dr. Daniel said in his segment, we unfortunately, due to the tragedies that have bared this new generation of the civil rights movement, we white people now see more than they have ever before, the need to unify and to become allies and to do the intentional work of identifying and dismantling white supremacy culture, not only in the professional workplace, but in their communities. And to get back to your previous point, how still, though, are some people, and this is not limited to white people, there are people across all racial lines that hold ignorant attitudes and would like to suppress historical and factual truths about what this nation has, how this nation has, you know, intentionally, in terms of the government, has intentionally oppressed groups of people. You know, the legacy of Trump's role as president and of Trumpian culture is that people who had for long, in terms of the respectability politics that was really ushered in as a result of Lyndon B. Johnson's and John F. Kennedy's presidency, in terms of really trying to address civil rights issue, the respectability politics that went through on a hush manner through the Reagan administration, through, even though we've seen it in policies, right? This idea of not saying what they think aloud was completely demolished with President Trump's appointment, right? He said what he thought. He brought his bravado to the bully pulpit in terms of rallying other individuals of like-minded, because it's not like economics, right? He was talking to this rich white man who often, you know, we see him as rich, but really have been bankrupt several times, but had the ability to connect to, as he said in a People magazine article or interview years before running, you know, he can connect with the Republican people because they believe anything on Fox News. He knew how to utilize propaganda. He knew how to utilize his bravado, how to position himself in an authoritarian figure that those people rally around, and how to get them to feel empowered. And so that is the legacy of his administration. Is it unbelievable? Yeah, because for years we thought, especially with President Obama's appointment, that, you know, we were turning the corner with our white counterparts being able to see the unjust facts about our history and where we are and why we are so disenfranchised. But, you know, truth always rings the bell last. So I'm very grateful for people showing their face and showing their hand. I think that this is the perfect time to do it because, as Dr. Daniel said, you know, the time is now. It is happening. Change is happening. It may have happened slow and may continue to happen at a slower pace than many of us would like to see, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I would wholeheartedly agree with you there, Shaquaya. I know that change is happening, and I know some people are pushing for, you know, they're pushing against it. They're really resisting it. But at this point, it's like, I think it's a futile attempt because, you know, there's so much diversity in this country that you can't put people in boxes anymore. And that scares a lot of people. That just scares a lot of people. Whether it's you can't put in people in boxes on, race, based on their race, or ethnicity, based on their sexual orientation, based upon their political views. Like, you can't put people in a box anymore. And I think that at this point, culturally, we just need to figure out how to coexist and live peacefully together. And more importantly, respect. I mean, we just gotta keep blowing and sounding the trumpet that we're gonna have to respect everyone for who they are, where they are from, and most importantly, to respect them for the person that how they want to represent themselves in person. And you can push back on that. You can say, oh, I'm gonna call you this, and even though you asked the person to call you that, and you're going to run up against a wall. I mean, at this point, we have to respect the Native American community. At this point, we have to, really walk in the shoes of someone else. And this requires empathy. This requires a certain level of consciousness. We got to respect people for the journey and for their history. And Black people should be on the forefront of that movement, in my opinion, Bakari, as we wrap up this conversation. But I feel like Black people needs to be at the forefront. Like, I know people say that we are not the assertive advocate for everybody, but I kind of disagree. We have undergone some of the worst treatment that human beings have ever dealt with. We have undergone a suffering that is so deep and has gotten to the fundamental level of who we are, and have yet been able to persevere.
I think we have the responsibility and the opportunity to just build upon our legacy. So I think that's, one of the things that stuck out to me about this historic instance that we're witnessing is that it was back in the 60s and 70s where some earlier racial slurs were removed from, their national inclusion in our language. And so I think that just having the opportunity to build upon that and to show, to Faraji's point, I think, whether we're out in front or just standing side by side to say this is something that we've already overcome, and just to be more strategic about our movement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sisters, we got to take another pause. When we come back, it's been 10 years. And Bakari, I know you can appreciate that because this is how we met. But it's been 10 years since the killing of Trayvon Martin. Do you remember his story? That little brother from down in Sanford, Florida, who was killed while wearing a hoodie walking to a corner store by George Zimmerman. It's been 10 years since his murder. And it's also been 10 years since the start of the Black Lives Matter movement. When we come back, we're going to check in with the co-founder of the Los Angeles chapter of Black Lives Matter. And she serves as a tenured professor at Cal State, Professor Melina Abdullah, to talk about this big moment that we're in and what can we expect next as we are still fighting for the movement for Black lives. So we'll have that conversation up next. So stay with us, folks. A lot to get to in the final 30 of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back to the show. 10 years ago, a young Black boy by the name of Trayvon Martin down in Sanford, Florida, went out to walk to the store, and he never returned home. 10 years ago, this Black boy, a teenager, did something so simple, yet in the eyes of his killer was so egregious, which was simply being in the place that he lived, that his killer thought he shouldn't be. 10 years ago, as a result of the killing of Trayvon Martin by the vigilante George Zimmerman, a movement was ignited. And so tomorrow will officially mark the 10-year acknowledgement of the killing of Trayvon Martin. There are going to be a number of events happening around the country. But most importantly, we wanted to make sure that you understood how important, how significant it is for us to take this moment, to take this, all that we have done, and to start the process of pausing and reflecting and just essentially just thinking over where we are, where we've come from, and how far we need to go when we're talking about this movement to protect Black lives. I'm joined by the tenured professor from Cal State, and she's also serves as the co-founding member of the Black Lives Matter Los Angeles chapter, my dear sister, Professor Sister Melina Abdullah, to talk to us about what we can expect and what have we undergone over these past 10 years and what's next for the next 10 years. Sister Melina, thank you so much, ma'am, for being a part of this conversation today. Oh, we got you on mute. Is that you on mute?
I am. That's how you know that you're old, right? Talk on mute. So, thank you for having me. Salam alaikum. Grateful.
Walaikum salam. Sister Melina, again, we appreciate your time today. But I had to bring this conversation up because I know that we there's a lot of things that we could talk about, right? But I think that it is significant that we talk about the story of Trayvon Martin and how the Black Lives Matter movement was started 10 years ago. And I think it's also important for us to kind of do a what they call a wellness check, to see where our heads are, to see where our hearts and our minds are around this issue of police brutality and community vigilantism that we continue to see, especially with the recent case of Ahmaud Arbery. So I feel like we need to do this wellness check. We need to see, okay, are we making the type of progress that we need to make? Are we making the progress that Trayvon Martin and so many others who have been killed unjustly deserve?
Right. So let me just uplift and acknowledge the tremendous spirit of Trayvon Martin, right? So Trayvon was not the first Black child to be killed by white supremacy or wannabe white supremacy, because it's questionable whether George Zimmerman is even white, right? His mother is Peruvian. So he might have had aspirational whiteness, but did not have all of the white privilege that he longed for, which may have been a contributing factor to how he got down and stealing the life of one of our Black children. And I really appreciate you for acknowledging his childhood, that Trayvon Martin was a child. He was absolutely Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin's biological son, and he was the child of the Black world, right? And I'm looking at his face, and I'm thinking about the words that were spoken by then President Barack Obama, who said, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. And he said that hypothetically. And I remember getting word of Trayvon's murder and seeing that shiny face and seeing the face of my own son, who's actually behind me here, right? My son, Amen. And it wasn't a hypothetical for me that when I saw Trayvon's face, he reminded me of my then 2-year-old Amen, who had the same shiny brown skin, the same dancing eyes, the same joy and excitement and a little bit of mischief mixed in. And that comprises like the soul of so many Black boys. And for this wannabe white man to have the audacity to stalk and attack and then steal the life, murder our Black child, caused us to step into movement. And I agree with everything you said, with one addition, that Black Lives Matter, we were born 8.5 years ago, the day that Zimmerman was acquitted in the murder of Trayvon Martin.
You're right. Yep. Thank you.
But the movement was begun 10 years ago. And so I absolutely want to lift up the incredible work, the fearless and courageous advocacy of Trayvon's family. What must it mean for a mother like Sabrina and a father like Tracy to, in the midst of their mourning, demand justice? And I also want to lift up the tremendous power of Black students, because this murder happened in Florida. If you remember, most of us did not know Trayvon's name in February of 2012. We learned Trayvon's name in the months to come because students at Florida A&M University stepped up, because students at universities all around the region stepped up and were demanding, they had to demand the arrest of George Zimmerman. And I think what we were most outraged by, or one of the things we were most outraged by, was not just the actions of George Zimmerman, but how the entire state protected his white supremacy. So when we talk about state-sanctioned violence, we're not only talking about murders at the hands of police, we're talking about how police and courts and every single part of what Dr. Yusef Salaam calls the criminal system of injustice doubles down and backs white supremacy and puts targets on the backs of Black people.
No, I would wholeheartedly agree, Sister Melina, because I think that, and I'm glad that you made that correction. And, you know, one is I remember being in Chicago, and I want to bring my culture crew members, Bakari Jones and Shaquaya McKenzie, back into this. And I was in Chicago with Bakari. And we were in Chicago convening to start an organization that is now called Black Youth Project 100. And it was 100 of us from around the country. And it was during the weekend. I think George Zimmerman's hearing or trial was during the weekend, and the verdict about him being not guilty happened on a Saturday evening.
That's right.
And 100 young Black leaders in Chicago said, this can't be happening. And it was out of that moment that Black Youth Project 100 was born. But it was also in that moment, Sister Melina, that, I mean, I didn't have any children then. I have an 8-year-old now. I have an 8-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. It hit me so hard. It hit me so hard because you would never expect for a young brother like Trayvon, who's simply just walking to the store would be posed as a threat. And for this country and for the members of the jury to allow George Zimmerman to go, to not be punished for this horrific crime. I mean, it just, and to have Black people on the jury to not punish him, it was a huge slap in the face, Mr. Melina. I was in a state of shock and hurt, great disappointment, frustration. I mean, I was all of the negative feelings you can think of, I was feeling that day, that evening.
Absolutely. That's the same moment when Black Lives Matter was birthed, right? So the date was July 13th, 2013. And we got word, and like you, and I'm further west than you, right?
Right.
Like you, if we were all glued to the television the entire day. But the commentators started to say, as it was becoming evening in Los Angeles and it was nighttime in Florida, that the verdict wasn't coming in and that we could expect a verdict on Monday. And so as a single mom of 3 kids, I did what I needed to do, pile my kids into my car and go and try and run my weekend errands. And I remember getting to my first stop and getting a call from my brother. And he said, you know, where are you at? And I told him, and he said, well, sit down because you're not going to like it. And he said he got off and they're giving him his gun back. And I just remember it hitting me and sweeping my children up and putting them back into the car and driving home and cooking dinner and bathing them and putting them to bed and finding someone to sit with them, and then calling over 3 other Black mamas and sitting on my big orange couch and mourning together, but then also letting our rage bubble up. And we went out into the streets that night, and there were already probably 1,000 people in Los Angeles, Leimert Park, which we call Africa Town, right?
Right.
And it's where we go. When something goes down, that's where we go. And I remember being in that space with these other Black mamas and having the power of the bullhorn. And I always tell like emerging organizers, the first investment you make is in a bullhorn, right? And having the bullhorn after having kind of grieved collectively in the park, and this young sister saying, I don't want to be in this park. And she said, I want to march. And I grabbed the bullhorn and said, so we gonna march. And, you know, 1,000 of us poured into the streets and began to march and began to engage in the way that Black Lives Matter engages in, which is shutting stuff down. I won't cuss on your show, but you know I like to cuss a lot.
Go ahead. You can say whatever. They can shut shit down.
We like to shut shit down. In fact, that's a whole ass chant, right? Who
right.
shuts it down? We shut shit down, right?
Right.
And so we believe in shutting down sites of white supremacy. So we marched north up Crenshaw till we dead ended into Wilshire, where the white folks live, right? And made sure that in the name of Trayvon Martin, that they didn't get to have peace, right? That old chant, no justice, no peace, we added to it, right? If we can't get no justice and you can't get no peace, right? And we did that for days. And by the third day, we were convened by my dear sister and co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, who'd been in conversation with Alicia Garza about the need to build a movement, not a moment. And I know that we're both in a position where we remember names that came before Trayvon's, right? We remember Oscar Grant and Sean Bell and Amadou Diallo and Devin Brown, and I keep going. And Trayvon Martin, it was his spirit who said that we'll continue to call individual names, but the entire criminal system of injustice, this entire country, which is founded on white supremacy, will not just be reformed, it will transform, because the people will make it so. And so that's what we did. And so again, we are grateful for the spirit. We're grateful for his family. We're grateful for all of the students who kicked it off 10 years ago, and grateful for the global Black community that caught on 8.5 years ago.
I want Bakari, I want to get your thoughts on this as we talk to Professor and Sister Melina Abdullah, and then Shakwe. I want to hear your thoughts as well. Bakari, when we talk about this moment 10 years ago, this was a major moment, and it's still a major moment for our progress and liberation in this country.
Absolutely. First, I just want to say to Professor Abdullah, thank you for being here with us today. And just like bringing all of those pieces and the layer, the path over the last 10 years that, that we've all experienced getting here. Farajii and I were together in Chicago, and I remember where the convening took place. I remember there being, I think there was like a golf course.
Yeah.
In that space. And for me, what I felt like was so shocking 10 years ago, I think being more naive about our justice system, to just be honest. And then like the juxtaposition of everyone that was in that room, all 100 of us, the level of energy and the level of electricity and anger and frustration and hurt and devastation that we were all collectively feeling. And then being able to see this golf course and to see, to be honest, a lot of white men able to just continue on the green as we were just, collectively experiencing despair. So that's kind of the way that I remember that moment. And, the way that it, just the way that it changed and it shifted. It's one of those things, I think people always talk about, like, everyone remembers the time when in their generation, when that thing happened, presidents being assassinated, Twin Towers, all of those pieces. And for me, learning about the verdict was one of the things that most stuck out to me about his acquittal.
Absolutely. Shaquaya, what are your thoughts about this? And then Sister Melina, we got to ask about this whole stand your ground law and where we are with fighting that. But Shaquaya, what's your take?
Just as you all recall, the very moment of the acquittal, I had been a year and a half fresh into my membership of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Shout out to my sorors. And I was at our national convention. I was representing as the chapter president from Morgan State, Alpha Gamma chapter. And I remember being so engaged, so excited about being a part of this grand 100-year legacy, because it was our 100th year, our millennial celebration in the convention, and having felt this privilege of being able to associate myself with women who were staunch advocates of what the African American community deserved and rightfully so fought for 100 years. And I remember that it was time to break from convening, from a session. And I had been glued to my phone waiting for the outcome of the trial. And I remember, just as you did, Professor Abdullah, that we didn't think we were going to get a conviction that night. We didn't think we were going to get a sentencing. We didn't know what would happen. I just stayed glued to my phone. And I remember walking to the restaurant with my line sister and watching the case as it played out and hearing a collective aghast in the streets of Washington, D.C. I heard everybody, every person of color that was outside screamed, cried, shouted. They couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was numb.
Yeah.
I was so numb and so upset that it was very hard for me to find focus in the convention in terms of talking about Delta business. My thought immediately was, what was I going to do as a student leader at Morgan State University, and following the lead of what was happening down at FAMU and rallying the call around the injustice, not just of this situation and of the laws that made the exoneration possible, but the collective reorganizing, the collective spirit of the civil rights movement that in the time of, what immediately came to my mind, honestly, was that I always studied and held with a high view the pain that was felt when Emmett Till was killed, the courage of his mother to lead the call and raising awareness around how white supremacy had killed her son. And Serena Fulton had not yet emerged, and Tracy Martin had not, they had emerged as leaders of this movement, but I think at the time felt more empathy and didn't necessarily cast them as so. But I remember feeling like history repeats itself.
Absolutely.
And this is the very thing my generation needed, to recognize that we still are living in the breath and have to continue what was not able to be finished with the assassination of our leaders in the civil rights movements of the 60s and 70s, and how we, had been doing work, but how the work needed to be done on a more vocal magnitude. And I was really angry, upset, but I was more than anything, I was motivated. I just knew that I had to do something. And that's what led me to becoming more further involved in activism in Baltimore City. And I proudly say that I think that for my generation, just as it was for the generations of the civil rights movement, we never wanted to see an Emmett Till. We never thought we would see a Trayvon Martin. We never, Barack Obama was president. I mean, we were riding the high.
Right. Yep. And Shaquay, I want to stop you just right there, because Sister Melina, I want to get to that quick point that we were in a Trayvon Martin and the origin of the Black Lives Matter movement shook us from the comfortable space that the election of President Obama put us in. It shook us, and it still shakes us. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Sister Melina. Like, I still feel like President Obama could have done a lot more around this issue. I know he had, the Attorney General Eric Holder to do some things, but I just felt like a lot of this came under his time in office, and I just like, when we look at the Stand Your Ground law, which was really the basis of this confrontation between Zimmerman and Trayvon, that a lot more could have been done. So what, when we look at this thing from a big picture perspective, what do we need to do? How do we push this thing forward? Because 10 years have passed, we're still seeing cases like this happen, and yet, you got Stand Your Ground laws in almost every state in this damn country. And it just seems like we're still not making the type of forward progress that we need to make with this case.
So I had to put myself on mute because I was making too many amens and uhs as Shaquay and Bakari were speaking. Thank you both for all of your work and for the beautiful way in which you encapsulated this moment. Of course, you as well, Brother Farajii. And I think that you're lifting up kind of what's required of us in the years to come, right? What's required of us is that we step fully into movement, that we think about non-reformist reforms like ending stand your ground laws. Stand your ground laws have led to an increase in murders between 11 and 33%. So states that have stand your ground laws, when you compare before they passed stand your ground laws to after, the increase in murder has gone up between 11 and 33% in those states. So it's really important to understand that stand your ground laws are used as a tool to allow for the murder, especially of Black people, at white hands. There's other non-reformist reforms that we have to push. We have to end no-knock warrants in the name of Amir Locke and Breonna Taylor. We have to end qualified immunity. Mm-hmm. So the year after George Zimmerman was acquitted, my cousin's son, Andrew Joseph III, was killed in Tampa, Florida, as a result of police. And 8.5 years later, so this happened in beginning of February of 2014, 8.5 years later, or a little over 8 years later, they still haven't even gotten a day in court. So wow. We absolutely have to end qualified immunity. Black Lives Matter, we're making this our campaign of the year. We have a signature gathering that we're doing. So we want everybody to sign at blacklivesmatter.com/EQI, blacklivesmatter.com/EQI for end qualified immunity. But beyond these non-reformist reforms, we also have to double down on movement work, right? So we made headway, we made progress. We saw major convictions, like convictions in the murder of George Floyd and Daunte Wright, although she didn't get nearly enough time. If he were a dog, she would have gotten more time. I'm talking about Potter, right? We saw convictions in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. We see police being fired. We see the passage of bills like the Kenneth Ross Jr. Police Decertification Act, which we fought for here in California, which prohibits police who kill people from jumping from the department that they were fired from to another department. So they can't get certificates to be police in other departments. We saw that, but we have to transform the world. So what Trayvon Martin demands of us is that we transform the world, that we think critically and build towards a public safety system that's rooted in strong Black community, not police who were built and created to put targets on the backs of our people.
That is absolutely pivotal, Sister Melina. That is so pivotal. And I think that a lot of times we look at these situations and these incidences and try to approach it from an isolated space rather than collective and movement oriented approach. And I'm a huge advocate that people need to get involved in some way, shape, or form. You put out there blacklivesmatter.com EQI. If people are becoming more and more conscious, which I truly believe is happening right now, not just Black people, I think white people, our Latino brothers and sisters, Native Americans, the Asian community. But if people are becoming more conscious, there's a duty that the conscious man and the conscious woman has. And when injustice is happening each and every day, there is an absolute duty. We do not have the liberty to sit on the sidelines and to watch and to just comment on a social media post or to like a Twitter post. We have a duty to get involved, to engage our minds, bodies, and spirits in this movement. And I think, Sister Melina, that is one of the big things that I took from that moment 10 years ago, that nothing is going to change unless we get involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What y'all did in Chicago with the birth of BYP 100 changed the world. What we did with the birth of Black Lives Matter changed the world and is changing the world. It's helping us Heed, again, you're in my head. I call it a sacred duty. Heed our sacred duty to do this work of transforming the world into one which is fit for the inhabitants of our children and our future generations, which honors and reveres our ancestors. We're still in Black History Month, right? Don't say the name Mama Harriet Tubman if you're not willing to struggle for justice, right? And so we have to consistently do the work. And we also recognize that backlash is real, that, you know, as we struggle to transform the world, white supremacy wants to dig its heels in, and it engages in ways that are harmful to movement. We have to overpower that. And we have to be very thoughtful and clear and courageously disciplined in building and doing the work that our people demand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sister Melina, I thank you again for your time with us this evening, and sharing your thoughts and providing your insight and context on this magnificent, this monumental moment, rather. And I thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And, you know, we'll sure enough have you back on, because we want to learn more about the work of Black Lives Matter and how we move forward in the great struggle to protect Black people across this country. Sister Melina Abdullah, thank you so much for joining us here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. To my culture crew, Shaquaya, and Bakari, excuse me.
Hey, we got a hybrid identity, Bakari.
Right, here we go. It's got a hybrid identity.
I like that.
I thank you so much, sisters, for joining us as always for our Friday night panel. Truly, truly appreciate both of you. Thank you so much. And God willing, we'll see each other next week.
Inshallah. Thank you, Farajii.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, that is going to do it for us. Again, a lot was said tonight. And I hope and pray that you got something that of substance from these conversations, from everything from reparations to just taking the time to remember 10 years ago where we were and how far we still have to go in this movement to protect Black lives. So, you know, my hope and prayer is that over the weekend, as you hear about, you know, all of these things that are happening, especially, you know, with the beginning of war in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, look, we have to stay vigilant. We have to stay involved, as Sister Melina said. We have to stay engaged as much as we can, because the world won't change itself. We have to do our part to change the world and make it a better place, not just for ourselves, but for the children who are coming behind us, for our future. We have to do our part today so they don't have to carry that great burden tomorrow. On behalf of my fantastic production team, I want to thank each and every one of you for being for joining us. I want to thank my culture crew all week. We've been having phenomenal conversations. They've been providing great insights, so we thank them. And I thank you for your continued support. But we still need your support. Yes, we need your viewership. Share all of our videos, whether it's The Culture, whether it's A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie, whether it's The Black Table with Dr. Carr, or Get Wealthy with my sister Deborah Owens, or Roland Martin Unfiltered. Share every program on the Black Star Network to show people that Black-owned media is here and we're here to stay. But we also need your support. So make sure you download Black Star Network. It's free. It can be downloaded on your phone, your tablet, or your television. And most importantly, give something to continue to be the fuel for this movement of Black-owned media. You can support the Black Star Network at our website at blackstarnetwork.com. You can give at Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, and Zelle. And of course, we want you to give as much as you can, but be a regular donor for Black Star Network and a regular donor and supporter of Black-owned media. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk on Monday for another exciting, informative, and insightful edition of The Culture right here on Black-owned media, the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in, and stay tuned at the 6 o'clock hour for my big brother, Roland Martin Unfiltered. Talk to you on Monday, God willing. Peace.